team, including voting members, and student organization chief committee of the whole meeting to the floor. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Please call the attendance.
Mr. Craig? Here. Mr. Costa? Here. Mr. Linden? Here. Ms. Mapp? Mrs. Weinberg? Vice President Bolton?
Present.
President Motley?
And here. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our first presentation and then tell board members the word for the day.
Yes, ma'am. So really not much of a presentation on the semi-annual report on bully allegations. Ms. Davis is helping me get that to you as we speak. But this is a report that we have to share with the board and make the board aware of each year. And then we have to post this report to our website for the public to be able to see. Just as you are looking at that on board docs, just in summation, you can see by school the number of confirmed bullying cases, the number of unconfirmed bullying cases, and if there are any unresolved cases.
And Superintendent Murphy, this is required, it's on board docs, I believe. This is required that we do this, right? Just at least have it a public presentation.
That's correct. It's done semi-annually. It has to be presented, shared with you, and then it is put on our website for the public to be able to review.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and I know this has been the case for well over 10 years or so. This report has been mandated, I think, by the state. And I know that one of the initial problems, and I've said this before, but one of the initial problems with this mandate is that, at least in the very beginning, and I don't know if it's still true, but in many districts, it actually, how shall I say it? It made it less attractive to concentrate on bullying if it was going to be public. This sounds terrible, but by having the reportage needed, initially there was a downturn regarding what people thought bullying incidences were. And I know we experienced that a little bit at CPS, but I'm wondering, I know we research and investigate all of the suggestions that they're there, but are we also kind of trying to verify that these are the only, or these are representative? I mean, how do we feel about these particular numbers and the authenticity of these numbers?
So of course, it would be great if there were no incidents of bullying, but in a district our size, that probably is not reasonable. But there are two mechanisms for which to report: directly at the school level with a teacher or administrator or some other trusted adult. And then in our school district, we do have a process using technology where people can go online and be somewhat anonymous about what they are choosing to report. And there are people who respond rather immediately to any of the cases that need to be reviewed.
And I remember when we put that into effect, and I think that's a really great idea. And how do you prepare administrators to make sure that we have some consistency of reportage? Because some may not want to have these be reported, or there's an opportunity to discount what's been reported, or do we have a clear definition of what is to be reported or what isn't? I know the student conduct has some definitions. How do we make sure that these are valid and hopefully comprehensive?
I think three things that come to mind. One, universally, educators are mandated reporters about things that happen with children and with young people. The second piece is every year we do review the code of conduct, and we review it at the beginning of the year and Generally speaking, most principals review it with their staff and their students at the semester when we return in January after a little winter recess. And the third thing I can share with you is through our Safe Schools courses, every Cincinnati Public School employee has to take a online course on the bully process, the definition, and what do you do about it in a particular situation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Craig.
We'll own the word that the president has given us today as brevity. And just want to highlight one point. The report is really about what incidents meet the definition of bullying, not what incidents were disciplined, correct?
Correct, exactly. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that. I was going to actually ask for that clarification. I remember a few years ago, when we had them during our health and safety reports, we had to clarify that because we were, even as board members, a little conflicted around, we kept going to discipline versus reported actually by the definition.
And I think it's good that you, as a board, support that we do have a full-time bully school social worker to help us really make sure that we're naming things that are confirmed, but this is bullying and this is really something else and should be addressed in a different way.
All good? All right. Thank you. If there are no more questions, Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our next presentation.
Yes, ma'am. So next we have Director Mike Turner. He's going to be coming to give us an update on where we are. Lots of information, Goal 1 and interims, Goal 2 and interims, Goal 3 and the interims, as well as Goal 5 and the interims.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So our goal tonight, as Superintendent Murphy said, and the next slide shows kind of the alignment between the superintendent's goals and what's in the strategic plan. I know that was a topic of conversation at the last board meeting, and there is, for the first three, a direct alignment from what's in the strategic plan that is sunsetting and the superintendent's goals. I will just point out the superintendent goal number 2 is specifically Algebra 1, which is strategic plan goal number 3. And we will touch on the progress for the adding to industry recognized credentials and the graduation status update as well. So jumping right into the third grade reading goal. The superintendent's goal is we will increase the percentage of third graders proficient in reading on the Ohio State test from 55.7 to 59.7 by September 26th. So the fall benchmarks have been given, and now they're already preparing for the winter benchmarks. Just a reminder, when it comes to the percentage that you see, that is projected proficiency based on the benchmark. And so what you see is that 39.1% of third graders have a projected proficiency. What that means is that's the percentage of students projected to reach proficiency in the spring if they make typical growth over the school year. Breaking that down a little bit on the next slide, we have the drilled down. We've also added, which is different from the past, because one of the superintendent's goals does delineate economically disadvantaged versus non. We now have that percentage in there. I will say that these percentages, and I know that you saw data in the dashboard recently. We're not calling it the dashboard, are we? We're calling it the scorecard. Sorry, I've dashboard from the past in my head. These are pretty on target with the trends from last year. So just wanted to point that out. But again, this is the projected proficiency for each one of our groups of students for the third grade reading. The next slide shows the very real action steps that are already in effect. This was put together a few days ago for posting, so there's certainly reflection that is occurring on the scores and applying the learnings so that there's a very intensified multi-week intervention. Certainly, some buildings need more support than others, and so the curriculum teams are drilling down into the buildings, looking at coaching cycles and whatever is needed to help the adults implement what is needed. Certainly looking at closing the gap strategies, because we know there are gaps across groups in different areas. And then we have the third grade reading tutors who are being trained continuously with a focus on comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, which we know help move the needle on the third grade reading test. And then, as always, just a strong system of continuity, because it has to be database that falls in line with our multi-tiered systems of support as well, because things have to go in the continuous cycle of looking at your data, doing your interventions, figuring out if the improvements worked, and then going back and redoing that cycle. So the next goal is the Algebra 1 goal. Again, this is first-time Algebra 1 test takers. The goal for the superintendent is to go from 47.1 to 51.1% by September of 2026. Again, the projected proficiency based on the benchmark right now is 42.4% of our students are projected to be proficient if they have typical growth over the school year. Looking at the groups, again, we have the same breakdown on the next slide as the previous goal. And so we have our percentages for all of our different groups, including economically disadvantaged and non. And so there's action steps that are already being taken to prepare for winter benchmark. And again, we have that progression from fall benchmark, there's interventions put in place, winter benchmark. That data will come out in January. Then those interventions are revised, new interventions put in place so that when state testing comes around in the spring, students are progressing towards proficiency on that. So the next slide shows the action steps for this goal. And so again, the continual strengthening of the implementation from a curriculum standpoint, database decision-making. They do a lot of collaboratives in Algebra 1 in particular, where teachers are brought together. They're given very targeted training in different areas that help them with Algebra 1. We do have our Algebra 1 pilot that is as a result of working with Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. So that is at West High, Woodward, and Withrow. Got a lot of effort being put into that with professional learning, bringing the education specialists together, working with the teachers. And again, you're going to find a similar thing with specialized building support in all of the areas that involve coaching cycles. In algebra, in particular, biweekly cohorts of Algebra 1 teachers coming together in that pilot and giving that special emphasis through the professional learning collaboratives. And then biweekly learning walks to make sure that progress is celebrated, but also to inform more support that would be needed. So the third goal is specifically around sixth grade reading and the gap. And so the superintendent's goal is specifically on the gap between economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged. The goal was to reduce the gap from 50.7 to 47.7% by September of 2026. Again, I want to stress that the percent that you see of 56.7 is the projected proficiency gap. That is not a proficiency percentage. That is the projected proficiency gap. So the next slide shows the actual projected proficiency. So for example, if you take the 94% for non-economically disadvantaged and subtract the 37.3%, you get the previous number, which is that gap. What is also, again, could be done with this is looking at gaps in many different groups, but the goal specifically addresses economically disadvantaged versus not. So the action steps for this one is, again, a collaborative. There was a makeup scheduled for a collaborative for teachers to come together. That will follow on into Q3. Again, some of the same coaching cycles with specialized building support. This one specifically working on Tier 1 settings. Just a side note, with our MTSS or multi-tiered systems of support, we have a rapid push out of professional development for our schools. In fact, we just did the second session today with 32 of our schools between yesterday and today, and we're doing a professional development after Thanksgiving with a group of schools that have not had PD yet. And so they are getting a lot of emphasis on Tier 1 and Tier 2 as well. So RIMPs, which are the reading improvement plans that the state is mandating for students who have not reached proficiency on state testing. This keeps ramping up. So this year, support has to be given for 6th graders. Next year, it will move to 7th graders. The following year to 8th graders, and it keeps going. And a student moves off of a RIMP once they meet proficiency on a state test. That has a whole host of things that kick into place because you have to figure out when to give the reading interventions. It's all for a great cause because we want the students to be proficient. So there is a level of support for the 6th grade teachers, which will be new this year when it comes to implementing the RIMPs. Very intentional gap closing strategies for students in this goal, in particular our multi-language or MLL students. And again, we want to make sure that we're always capitalizing on data and the continuity of the process. So we move to our superintendent goal number 4, and even though we don't have data on this one because it would be implemented, we did just want to give you an update. So this one was to add 2 industry recognized credentials of 7 points or higher by September of next year. And there are some kind of time-bound things with this one, so updates are really important. The next slide shows progress thus far. We have done a scan of all the credentials that ODEW has approved. There aren't any 7, 8, 10, or 11 point options. Those just don't exist. So we have looked at a viable pool of largely 12-point credentials. There are a very small amount of 9-point credentials, and we are looking at one of those in particular. Some are repeated. Phlebotomy is repeated by a number of vendors. So is welding. Other things that we already offer, we've just taken those off the list because it wouldn't make sense to offer the same credential from 2 different vendors. We're looking at the feasibility of the remaining options, and we are have already built an initial short list that we will look at. Some of those are in agriculture, manufacturing, and health, but there are others as well. So the next steps with this goal is to narrow the list, look at what district-wide rollout would look at, including cost factors, because we know we have to tie it to budget, and that could involve staffing, equipment, supplies. Gathering input from the Business Advisory Council is really important. They should be guiding what we do with this sort of thing. That doesn't mean they tell us what to do, but they give input. So Board Member Crossett was part of the meeting the other day, and we had an activity to get feedback from our BAC. And we have up there apply to ODEW by March the 1st. They are trying to do away with deadlines and just make it a continuous process that stays open. So we're hoping for that, but we still have a deadline of March the 1st to apply because this does have budgetary impacts perhaps with some of the credentials. And then finally, graduation. Could go on for hours about all of the things going on with graduation, but just to give you some high-level information with this, there are lots of tracking documents with expectations, definitions, and all the data processes that are in place. And so there are a number of ways to track graduation, including credits, competency, and readiness. Students have to have the credits in order to graduate, so that's tracked. And it actually even goes by grade level in looking at whether a student is on target. That's one of the factors. We also have competency, which would either be the state mandated testing, or perhaps they need to go into the career option. Maybe they sign up for the military, all of those things that could help them graduate. Grades 11 and 12 have building created graduation trackers that they had started with that were individualized by building. Those are being phased out so that there is a standard common district tracking system that is now in effect for 9th and 10th graders that will reduce any errors or inefficiencies that could occur because it's one form that everybody would use. College Department does a great job in working on that. The next slide shows just again what they look at. That's a drilled down approach, but there are meetings in a variety of different ways to look at data, to escalate those issues that need to be escalated by student. It's not just by building, it's by student. And so there's cohort meetings with individual school administration, and then the EMIS department actually looks at the cohort lists and makes sure that all of the students are in there. Again, we've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again that in the denominator, it's whoever is in your cohort according to ODEW. So a particular high school may have 100 seniors, but ODEW may say there's 140 because 40 of those students somehow no longer go to Cincinnati Public Schools. And if we can't identify where they went, then that becomes problematic. So EMIS works with the schools on that. Finally, the next slide just summarizes these key checkpoints. And I'm not going to repeat that. It's just another way for you to see it. And the next slide actually gives you an update, and this is as of the 7th of this month. So those numbers, if we looked at them today, would be a little different. But this just gives you an example of the drilled down approach. So cohort 2026, which are the students who are supposed to graduate in May of this school year. And the reason why we avoid saying 12th graders is not all of them are 12th graders in focus. And sometimes students say, I'm a 12th grader, I'm going to graduate, but maybe they have 10th grade credits. So we have to be careful about that. So cohort 2026, there's 2,700 students in the cohort. 63% of those students are on track, and the criteria to show that they're on track is they have credits greater than or equal to 15. That the competency piece of this means they've passed ELA, 10th grade, and Algebra 1, or they have completed an alternate pathway. Could be the career readiness pathway or some other. And they have one of their SEALs completed and a second one started. Right now, there are 204 students in that cohort who are coded as a dropout, and there are different codes for that. Won't go into that. And then the areas of need, in particular, attendance is problematic, as we know. We do have certain populations with attendance and dropout rates, and much of that is due to the climate issues that we've experienced in our city and across the country. And then competency scores, if they are not hitting the cut score for English 10 and Algebra 1, they have to have both of those. They could do great on English 10 and never, ever be proficient on Algebra 1. They have to have both. And so something else has to kick in. Not going to repeat everything for cohort 2027, but we know that based on the cohort denominator and the other criteria, which is slightly different because they're not seniors, so the number of credits is less. That is 64%, and 74 of those students are coded as a dropout as of November the 7th. So again, this is continuously updated. Schools work by student, and at any given time, people could say, these are the students on track, and these are the students who are not. And so the next slide just gives some graduation action steps, clarifying and communicating. Consistency is a common theme with this, with so many high schools, so many students. We have to make sure that there are the consistent protocols put in place so that there is effective intervention and progress monitoring. Targeted support is, again, a theme that you see through curriculum and with graduation. Here, it's just a little bit different. A lot of times it's about tracking, but it's also about what is the school doing for the students who need a certain type of intervention. Streamlining data is always a desire so that people can have timely data that is accurate. Standardized documentation, reinforcing that, and then supporting principals in fully owning the cohort meetings. There has been a move to do that over the last year or so because the principals live in the buildings, they know their staff, and it is better for that to occur than to try to have multiple people in multiple meetings. And so that is a goal that is being worked on as well. And I believe that's the last slide. And as always, we're here for kids.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Board members. Board Member Craig.
So I have a couple of questions, but I'll try and keep them pretty focused. I think the first question I have, and I think this is something I've seen as a pattern in our district at times where we have positions that are there for support, that we haven't really defined what that position does. And I was thinking about this with regard to our third grade reading numbers, because I think we've implemented a lot of things into trying to improve third grade reading by adding additional support roles. And if we looked at the effectiveness of those roles, or maybe the consistency of how those roles operate within schools, because I know that that's one of the things that we saw, especially with our with trying to standardize some of the resource coordinator roles, is trying to get them to be doing something consistent so that that shows a measurable result that we get a benefit from. So is that something we have either implemented or tried to implement or are looking at with regard to kind of standardizing or looking at what places have the best practices and kind of coupling those in?
Yes, sir. So we started that work this fall, making sure that all of the third grade teachers were trained in a particular way for approaching this third grade reading piece. We didn't necessarily have that before. Sometimes buildings would be on their own, or sometimes it would be only a particular group of students and schools. And so what we wanted to do was take what we know has been successful and apply that across the board to everyone. Where we want to go next is a deeper look at the K-3 literacy spectrum overall. So instead of waiting and putting all the eggs in third grade preparation, what are we doing as the preschoolers are coming into kindergarten to first, et cetera, so we have an even stronger foundation?
One of the other things that I'll add, speaking of MTSS from before, part of the MTSS framework is a decision tree, and in that decision tree, in different places of the framework. It identifies a role who should be supporting an intervention, and I think that helps as well with exactly what you're getting at, pairing that with what Superintendent Murphy said, because that does come up in training as people do talk about, well, this person in my building helped me do that. But I hear your point that what if this person in my building didn't help me do that? So.
Yeah, and again, I think what I would hope that we can do as we build a strategic plan going forward is not necessarily in the plan, but in the implementation of the plan, look at ways to make sure we're getting efficiency and effectiveness out of some of those roles that we've just historically had in the district. I think the other question around Algebra 1, and this one for me is also a little bit different because I think some schools have implemented Algebra 1 earlier, our opportunities to use Algebra 1 earlier, and that does present some of the challenges also with looking at what our numbers are, because if students are at a high pace process and they're being asked to take Algebra 1 8th grade and show some success. In other schools, it's implemented at 9th grade, and now it's a different model or different style. Have we seen any challenges or any difficulties in that?
So I can speak to that just a little bit. So I will say that this is definitely on the radar. So Assistant Superintendent Randolph has gotten a meeting on the calendar with curriculum and people from the Office of Secondary Education to talk about when Algebra 1 is offered outside of the 9th grade. Part of the thing that has occurred is as we've had middle schools come on board, some of the high schools that had the middle schoolers had Algebra 1 for some students in the 8th grade, but then you have to figure out how do you carry that on. And so that meeting is coming up, I think, first or second week in December. I can at least speak to that part. I don't know if Superintendent Murphy has anything to add on that.
That's perfect.
And that's exactly part of the reason I was asking also, is because I'm recognizing we have different middle schools who are operating at different approaches. And so if a middle school doesn't offer as extensive a curriculum on Algebra 1, even though we're doing Algebra 1 pilots at the high school level, if a student's able to take it at the middle school level, or at least get exposed to more of it at the middle school level, they're better prepared to pass it at that 9th grade level. The last kind of quick question is really on looking at the on-track, off-track. I actually think we should probably, on some of these elements, look at them at the 7th, 8th grade level, more so than even at the 9th grade level, because a student coming in, again, because we've implemented the middle school plan, I would love for us to be able to also assert that when they completed 7th and 8th grade, as they walk into 9th grade, what track or what, are they on track or are they off track? Because what I am a little bit worried about is that we're now having two different groups of folks kind of trying to prepare the students through high school. Because we're doing some career tech, we're doing some work on, like Algebra 1 or some of the other components to prepare them so that when they get to high school, they're ready. It depends on where you go for middle school and then where you go for high school. It may be different. And so I just want to, are we able to do a little bit also in looking into in 7th and 8th grade as they leave 7th and 8th grade, is there something we can measure or look at to see whether or not they're on track? Because I think we can also have some of these things accomplished well before they get to their last year of high school, right? So if a student has both SEALs their 11th or 10th grade year, they're getting, or at least on track to get both SEALs by their 11th or 10th grade year, then we're not worried about it at high school trying to finish. And that was something we talked about in student achievement when we first joined 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. Because that was one of the things we were concerned about, was that with the new requirement of the SEALs, there was so much of an emphasis put on the 12th grade year. And in some cases, students were not, just didn't think about it. You know, they didn't prepare themselves because they weren't thinking about it. And I think if we're going to start with some of those things that we've been doing at the 7th and 8th grade to give work, at least with some of the opportunities to do some of the focuses at each of the 7th and 8th grades programs, that we can at least maybe make some assessments as to whether or not they're on path, on track, do they need some additions, or are there things we need to do as they go into 9th grade to make sure they stay on track or that they get ahead of track.
Thank you. Any other board member questions? Is that a yes, Vice President Bolton?
Yes,
Okay.
please, thank
Vice
you.
President Bolton.
A couple of questions. First, on the career piece, you said you've got a kind of a long list, short list, and I think you're right, that it doesn't do any good for redundancy, if just because you're changing vendors or something. I think that makes sense. I know on our career readiness, and readiness overall, we did very well, at least among the cohort of the 8 urbans. I think we were first in readiness or close to it or something. Or no, we met state standards by getting a 3 or something. The schools which are our schools that don't have a significant number of career readiness pathways?
Yes, so the schools that, so Walnut, even though Walnut has they have a senior-only cybersecurity, they don't have a pathway. I will say there have been conversations about pathways, which makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
Spencer also has senior-only, but they have senior-only IT. We do not have a pathway there. We do have some of our schools that have career tech, but it's not like a Hughes, a Woodward, a Taft, or a Withrow where nearly everyone goes into career tech. And so that would be, so Gamble, we have agriculture, but it does not cover, like if every student at Gamble wanted to go into agriculture, there is not enough teaching space for that. We also have, and I think this has been discussed before, West High and Dater have a fairly small amount of career tech programming for that many students. So that's an area of growth. I will say that even though there may not be a career pathway, there are quite many students graduating because of the career readiness option, and that's typically because of a 12-point credential package and then Ohio Means Jobs readiness seal, and those two combined also give them the 2 seals that they need because you can double dip with those. So those are the ones that come to mind. Aiken is at probably about 60% saturation, maybe 50 to 60% at Aiken.
I just think we think of, we've been very careful the last at least 15 years to make sure that we are preparing our kids for college as well as preparing them for careers and what have you. And we don't want any of our kids to graduate without feeling that they have choices. And we want them to be capable of making those choices and prepared to make those choices. I just think maybe that kind of might work in another way too, in that some of those places where we have not invested that much time or staff or thought, because we're thinking this is more college preparatory, might not be a bad option for many of those kids. It might be I don't know which of the 16 clusters of careers that would entail, but it would seem that those kids should have an option too, whether it's coming out of the Montessori's or whether it's coming out of the, a Walnut or wherever, that it seems that would be fair, that they shouldn't necessarily not have that opportunity. We know they're going to be into careers and making those decisions, and certainly we're going to have the resume to be hired or accepted at a college or hired in the workforce. I'd just like us to think a little bit more about that evenness, and I think that would also help us with the report card as well, if some of those schools additionally had the opportunity. The other, that's it I have for the career, but I do have a question. I know that part of the report card that we did, at least the way they worded it, seemed to be where we had our biggest problem was the gap piece. Their language was kind of harsh on the gap category rather than the rest of the categories. And I think it's watching the demographics, which is what the board is very interested in, and making sure there's fairness and what have you, and equity, as well as some degree of equality. I'm interested, do we look, when we look at demographic groups, I know we look at it in the aggregate. I know we look at it district-wide. This group is throughout all of our schools or something, and here's this group or that group. Do we look about how different demographic groups perform and their outcomes in various schools? Meaning, do some kids do better in the PK-8 model? Or do we know, are there neighborhood schools where indeed our white kids are doing better or worse? Or do people do better in the PK-12? Do we study where the kids are having particular success, or where there's disaggregated enough that we could say this kind of school works best? And it's not like looking at staff or looking at, maybe that's part of it, but is there a model that works better where the gap decreases or diminishes, or where certain demographic categories of children or teenagers do better? I don't know. It's interesting to me because of the tremendous variety when you look at the report cards for all of our schools, just the range of difference of where schools were achieving, so there's a bunch of surprises, and then there's, oh yeah, that's obvious, or what have you. I just wonder if we look at the demographics school by school. And it's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are some good questions. I'm going to go last, but I'm going to piggyback off of both of your two questions because I have to build on that. That was where I was thinking. Board Member Mapp.
Yes, so I'm in some ways tracking with where Board Member Bolton, what she spoke about in terms of the disparity that we're seeing with the economic disadvantage versus the non-economic disadvantage. And I'm a firm believer that while we recognize that there may be challenges in those that are experiencing some economic disadvantages, I'm a firm believer, having taught several students from this demographic, that they are equally able to excel and do exceptional work. And so I'm curious to know about the resource allocation. If there's a contractual thing that may maybe cause this disparity in terms of where we're placing our teachers. Is it an access and opportunity concern? So I'm trying to drill down on what are we noticing as it pertains to this particular area, and how do we provide that turnaround support and turnaround work to ensure that all of our students, in spite of their economic background, are able to be successful.
I know just one example, but this is a while ago. We haven't done this in several years, but we used to do a budget where there was weighting in different categories, whether it was a student with disabilities, the level of economically disadvantaged students. And I don't know the history of why we got away from that, but what you're saying makes sense to revisit how we allocate resources, especially with this being a focus area. And so it's something, I think everything that's been brought up is something really for us to dig into. I have not looked at that, but you are giving me food for thought.
Thank you for that. I think it will really generate or yield some really important information. And again, I know that we have our CBA, so I don't know what that particularly looks like, but if we're, I know several, boards and administrators just at different conferences has talked about how we allocate our stronger teachers, right? Maybe in those particular contact areas or different schools, so that we are able to ensure that our students are successful. So look forward to just feedback as you begin to maybe look more closely at that information.
Great, thank you. Board Member Lundy.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think I have three comments. I think the first one is I just really appreciate the alignment between this meeting and the goal setting we've done around the evaluation and the conversations we've had over the last couple of meetings. To me, this feels like some of the most focused conversations we've had in a committee of the whole, just in terms of trying to keep focus on a small number of most important things with some discipline. And so I truly, truly appreciate that. And I think this setup is a big step forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Both the topic alignment and just the visibility into where we are versus where we want to be at the end of the year. I think on all of those outcomes, I think that is a really critical first step. So thank you. I think I'm still trying to size the second thing. Where we seem to be headed versus where the goals are versus past years. Some of those numbers seemed quite scary to me. And I didn't want to breeze past them too quickly without checking to see if my level of surprise and concern is in line with others or not. But when we were landing at 55 and change last year, trying to get to 57 and change this year, and when I first saw the number, could we go back to the third grade reading number for a second? When I first saw this, I thought it was, oh, that's 39.1 who would pass today. We need to then close a gap to get all of them to pass, or 59.7% to pass by the end of the year. But then I read this more carefully. I don't think that's what this says. This says that if present trends continue, 39.1% at the end of the year will be proficient. And so I wanted to ask, am I interpreting this correctly? If I am interpreting it correctly, can you help me understand how concerned or not concerned we should be about this and why?
So we can talk about interpretation, but my immediate response is kind of two things. One, I'm glad that you said that you see the progression and how this is being done. If you remember when we did the last board meeting, the scorecard, and we showed fall to fall benchmark, there's improvement. So looking at this presentation a few times, only today in this moment, listening to Mike talk through it, I'm thinking, you know what? We don't have what the benchmark was at this time last year. So you could see the difference.
I mean, that's helpful. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, that's basically what I wanted to share.
And if I could just say, so a year ago, the percentage of projected proficiency for this was 38%. So this is higher than a year ago. And actually, I mean, I could tell you for each one of the three, where we were a year ago. And like, I'll
That's
just
okay.
briefly say, like, sixth grade reading is a year ago was lower than what it is now. And so the way this always seems to work is fall projected proficiency comes out, actions are put in place, then there's winter, which will hopefully be higher than the fall, right? And then action steps are put in place, things are refined, and then you get your scores. So we are either about the same or ahead of the game for each one of these three from what was presented fall a year ago. And then the dashboard does show the actual data. Yeah.
Well, and look, I think seems to me, first of all, I appreciate that. It does seem like two things are true. One is that's good news because we are better than where we were a year ago. So we should take that. The other is we got to get some better forecasting materials, because if we're regularly off by 20 percentage points, I mean, that's a terrible forecasting tool. Like if I predict that I'm going to owe, $15,000 in taxes at the end of the year, but instead I wind up owing $25,000 in taxes at the end of the year, that's a huge difference. Like I got to have a better system for my own life. It seems like we need a better system for the way we're forecasting, because you can't plan if you're off by that much. It can be a topic for another day, but I led with the point about alignment and visibility. I stand by that. I appreciate it. I'm glad things are looking better. Would be great if we had some better tools. for trying to steer the ship. Then the last thing I wanted to add was I'm so glad that we made the $350,000 investment in supporting teachers on curriculum implementation. Well, on most of these goals, third grade reading, Algebra 1, closing, class-based, reading gaps for sixth graders, on all the other work we do, so much of the ball game is whether or not we can help really strong, rigorous curriculum come to life in the classroom for students. I think we've done a good job of purchasing high-quality curriculum. We have to help teachers get it to work the right way. And so I'll just come back over and over again. I think that was a good decision. I think it's going to make a difference if we stick to it. And I would just come back to one last part of the support on curriculum. One other part of the budget was re-scoping some of the responsibilities for a couple of these roles. This was the curriculum coaches, the district-wide mentors, the lead teachers. I think if we go back a month or two ago, there was some work that was happening to clarify all of that. There was a retreat that was going to happen. There was the RFP. There's a bunch of stuff that was going to happen. I think one thing that I had wanted to see but had pushed pause on because those things were all still happening, but now would love to return to, is just on one page, what's the difference between what those people were doing last year and what they're doing this year? Because I think that if we can, that's where the rubber's going to meet the road on so much of this, is whether we can get people who can help into classrooms, supporting teachers, making their curriculum come to life. So can I request that? It's not urgent, but I would like maybe before the winter holidays.
Yes, absolutely. And the great thing is all of those people did come to the table for the retreat that we had. And so I am excited about that and should be able to prepare what's the difference.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give my comments and then we can go back around again. So I was a little concerned about that, and that's where I wanted to start, because I think we can do better around forecasting. That doesn't give me hope. It doesn't make me leave the meeting feeling very hopeful. We're at 39.1, especially since I don't see the previous year's data that you say we were better this year than we were last year. So my suggestion is that if we're going to say that, we have that data to look at, because that's very it places it a little bit more in context, although it does not alleviate my concern. I also agreed and wanted to build a little bit more on, very briefly, what Vice President Bolton shared. Can we go to the slide, Rob, around this economically disadvantaged? To me, and I've been asked this question before around economically disadvantaged students and how they need this, and they do need extra supports, but that does not define their achievement level. And so I'm concerned when you post all of this, you posted the subgroup, but then you clarify that, hey, if we subtract 84.1 from 35.9, that's the number that we see on the other screen. That explains that, but it doesn't tell me why we've got the Black students that are significantly low on every single area in your slide presentation, every single one. It doesn't also explain to me, when I see action items, how we're going to significantly increase that demographic. If we go back to another, we can go to the graduation, we can go to the algebra, like they're significantly lower along with Hispanic students, yet I don't see where the alignment of the action items is going to increase significantly those subgroups. And I also don't see the transition or the trend data of where those subgroups were versus where they are, their projected proficiency. I just think I am super appreciative of the presentation, but I would like a little bit more clarity for surety that we're going to meet the goal. And I understand that you were saying, hey, in the winter it comes back this, but we're in the fall. And you just gave me a 39% proficiency right now. And the goal is 50 some odd percent. So to tell me that we're going to get there without any demonstration that we've done this before is concerning. So I'm leaving that with you all. I'm trying to be brief, but this has a lot of different concerns just from a data standpoint. And the forecasting, to me, I think we skipped some things because the forecasting should have more data in between there. It should definitely, we can break it down by quarter, we can just do different. With regard to the industry credentials to implement, I understand and appreciate and have sat on and interacted with our BAC. I absolutely love our BAC, but one thing that is missing from the BAC is the student interest. I know for a fact, because I was at Schroeder with Board Member Crossett, and the students asked questions of us about why they could not have a phlebotomy program, which we knew nothing about. And when we asked the principal, it had to do, of course, with funding, but replicating the program that was at another school, very successful, that students wanted in their program at their school, she was not able to just replicate that. So I would suggest, while you're looking at, and I also would suggest that you look at schools that have a gap, because I'm not interested in what you all are, I'm less interested in what you all think that we can implement quickly versus what students want and will participate in and will reduce our absenteeism rate and will get them to actually be successful. They're asking for things that I don't know if you know that those students at Schroeder were asking for phlebotomy, but
Definitely aware of Schroeder. That came down to budget. I would love to have some of our programs on both sides of the city. That way there's not the transportation distance. Definitely at the foundation of Career Tech is student interest. I mean, if somebody asks me what's the factor to add a program, I say two things. First is student interest. And second is, does the facility allow that program to be at that school? So Schroeder, for example, when they wanted to add a career tech program about 3 years ago, the reason why they got health added, and so right now they have medical bioscience and they have farm tech that they've had for years. The reason why that got added is Navient surveys. The top sector that came out, there were 2 or 3, but health was one of those. And so we added a health program. For a couple years, we weren't allowed to add any career tech programming in the city. So I'm happy now that we're having these conversations. So I'm more than willing, but again, there's budgetary impacts to adding a program. And like phlebotomy being added to Schroeder would have been the cost of a teacher and the cost of the equipment. And in lean budget times, sometimes the answer is no with those. So I don't disagree with anything that you're saying.
I completely understand. I guess as a community member, the community is confused because they hear the governor talk about career tech dollars. They hear all of these other schools that get career tech dollars, yet ours are limited by budget, and there's millions that are available for career tech dollars. So I think we have a lot to do with regard to, I think that was my comment, that we need to survey students. We also need to tap into some of the existing funds. And I also would like for us to look at some of the programming that exists and expand on that. We've got students doing drones in other schools. But there are wait lists of students, and we're trying to search for things to build. And I don't hear that we're applying for these funds. I don't hear that with ODEW, they have this money and we're trying to capture that so that we can expand it. And so those are some of the things that I would really like to hear. With regard to the graduation slide, I think it starts at 16, Rob. And this is kind of my last one. The community is really confused on what that graduation number means. And I'm pretty aware of it, but with this presentation, I wasn't very clear, or I can see where the community is not very clear. I'm wondering, what are we doing to educate our students in the school around graduation requirements? Like, what are we doing? Are we not just checking off a box that, hey, you've met these requirements, you're here, but are we really educating from like a cohort model, like 7th and 8th graders? Do students know that ninth grade is where it matters, and at the end of ninth grade, this is where you are, where you're deficient, and are we having a checklist where we told the parent, they attempted this number of hours and they've only earned this number of hours? Like, where are we putting recognizable stops so that the student is aware of their data, that the parent is aware of their data, and where are we educating the community on what graduation, that number means? Because they don't understand a 2.5 stars might be 82%. Like, they don't understand that. And we're talking about this as if everyone understands it. And it's such a significant number. We didn't put it on these superintendent's goals, but it is something that we're going to continue to monitor. So I guess my question is, where are we educating the consumer around what that means? Because that's part of resolving the issue. Where are we doing that, if at all? Or can that be an action item? I didn't see that part.
Dr. Moffitt, I will happy to share Thursday when we had the principals meeting. If you recall, we started to do the deep dive with the report card components with our principals to make sure they understood and can speak about each of the components and how do we make growth in each of the components. So where we can do work is creating a parent checklist that you just described, because I do not think we have that, but I think that would be helpful. As it relates to the community, maybe something similar to this parent, maybe not a checklist, but something to inform them and make them a little more knowledgeable about this report card and what the components are and how we're measured as a school district.
Thank you. And the only other thing is, I just think we need to look at those numbers with regard to school. And that Vice President Bolton started on that. The numbers, to me, ask more questions. And I'm interested in the trend data per school, per demographic. So if you're going to give me Black students are at 27%, what were they 3 years ago? And what schools are moving and what schools aren't moving. And that should drive where we put these extra supports, particularly around career tech and all of that other. So I'm looking forward to it. I think we are where we are. We're gonna move and we're gonna get better. And I appreciate the data. I know Board Member Craig had a
Just
question.
Quick clarification, because I wanted to make sure I was understanding this as Board Member Lindy inquired about as well. Are we saying that the benchmark numbers are a student walking in the fall semester or the fall quarter, or whatever, the fall period of time, that we are projecting what that number would be if no other intervention happened and they grew at their natural level, this is what the number would be? Then what we would expect is that we'll do a bunch of things to improve and implement and action items, and then therefore that would increase what proficiency looks like at the end of the year. Is that what we're saying, is what the benchmark number is?
Correct. So the students that make up the 39.1% for third grade reading, let's say, if they just make typical growth over the school year, then they're not necessarily going to raise that percentage. It's those things put into place that push the students so that they are making more than typical growth. So if you have a student, for example, who's reading at a second grade level, and if they only make typical growth, they're still going to be behind when they take the third grade reading test because they're reading at a second grade level. And we know that there's third graders who are reading at a first grade level. I mean, we know that. And so again, I do understand concerns about the fidelity of the projection but those are the tools that we have. And I will say that the tools that we have are used pretty much across the country widely in many cases. And I just know and can tell you, and I apologize for not having, I think I was relying on the dashboard data. If I hit this microphone one more time, somebody should throw a microphone at me. We have the dashboard or the student, whatever it's called. I keep forgetting what we're calling the dashboard. report scorecard. That has all of the data on there, but if we need to have it for this type of meeting, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would make two kind of maybe recommendations as it's reported out. So I think one is, it's definitely helpful to see how the past years where we started at that benchmark, where that winter benchmark moved based on the numbers we saw, where the spring benchmark and where students ended up is a good pathway. And I know that's one of the ways we used to look at that information, because it told us also the narrative of what happened last year and how we saw success. And therefore we could somewhat, why we're projecting the success this year.
Right.
I think the other part to it, and just maybe a reframing of way it's described, it's like if we did nothing other than just had the kids show up every day, this is the number we would see. We know we don't do that. We know that is never how the school will ever operate. We know that there is no teacher in their right mind who would ever sit in the classroom and say, this student's struggling, I'm just gonna do the same thing I did every day. So we know there's gonna be a natural, okay, there shouldn't be a student in any school, or there shouldn't be a teacher in any school who ever does that. But I think what we can say is that we will see a certain level of natural progression based on, even without our interventions, based on like a intervention by the teacher, intervention by a parent, whatever. And then in addition to that, we have these action items that we're trying to do that will add on to that number to grow it. I just think, I think maybe also framing the way that that's understood as the low point of what we think a classroom will have if we did nothing, and if there was nothing else supplemental to what is just a daily education, might be a better way to frame it. Because I think one of the things that it kind of set up for us is that it's like, okay, so now we're essentially saying 39% are going to be proficient, and this is the stuff we're doing to get them there, as opposed to 39 to be proficient if we did nothing. We're doing stuff to get that 39% up to 59.7%, right? The one other point I wanted to just call attention to, and I think this is with regards to the workforce development, or the industry recognized credentials.
Yes.
And I think one of these things, two things can be true. I'm stealing a line from Board Member Lindy right now, but two things can be true at the same time. We can need to address and expand opportunities for some of the stuff that we've already offered in schools and ways in which we can do so. And we need to expand opportunities that we may not have offered in the past. And so I'm not to say that we shouldn't explore. The thing that we'll hold you accountable for as part of your goals is the expansion. I think the thing that will show success for our students is, or to add the new, thing that show the opportunities for our students is the expansion of opportunities we already offer. And where that can be done, to President Moffitt's point, is looking at some of those relationships and partnerships and grants and funding sources that might be able to offer those opportunities in future years. The only caution I would put into that is that we would also then need to make sure we address beyond that 1 year we get a grant, or the 2 years we get a grant, whether or not a program is sustainable. Because we have taken on a lot of programs over the last few years, and then we can't give them up because people want them and need them, but the grant ends or the funding source ends for it. And I know that's one of the big things with ESSER that we are still struggling with, is that we committed a lot of stuff under ESSER that we now can't afford, or now are taking money for something else to do. So yeah. I do think we should explore opportunities to provide more of those programming and partnerships with more than, yes, with the Business Advisory Council, but also with, again, some of our union partners, some of our other community partners, some of our business leaders. Look at GE Aerospace and some of the other organizations that have recently put a lot of money into the city and investing in workforce development. See if we can snag some of those dollars to bring it to the district for pre-workforce development with our students through certain programs, and maybe more targeted programs. And then the last point I just wanted to make is, I think we also can, for some of the research that we're discussing, one of the benefits I got at the Council of Great City Schools conference was there was a discussion around using some of your local college students to do some of the industry research and to the compiling of data and putting those numbers together. And so I think that may be an opportunity to look at some of those partnerships with Xavier, with UC, with Mount St. Joe, with even NKU, if there are students in those fields who can do some of the data analytics, that may allow you to spend more time on, once you get the data back and the research back, what to do with it, as opposed to spending as much time on doing the data part. So I just would offer that as an opportunity to
It's a
explore.
really great idea. Just to speak to one of the things that we've done with manufacturing, for example, so we got a manufacturing grant for this year for $170,000. So that ends in June, no more. But we are milking that for as much as we possibly can for sustainability into the future. And I think over the last 5 years, we've had at least $500,000 worth of those grant opportunities brought in, because the dollars coming from the state have shrunk, and we're not a Butler Tech or a Great Oaks. They do have a different funding model than we do, and so that's why you see the gleaming buildings that they have. So it's definitely sustainability, and at least for us, most of the extra money that we've gotten, we have to show sustainability. And we didn't get any of the ESSER dollars in Career Tech, and so that's been a good thing for us, not having to replace things that were spent with ESSER dollars.
All right, Board Member Crossett.
Yes, I'll be very quick. I do want to reiterate, I think having last year's numbers compared to this year's numbers, we've all said it, but I do want to emphasize that context is really important. I think there's some kind of assessment test that students can take for Career Tech that shows their interest compared to their aptitude.
Yes, Naviance has a career interest profiler that they take
Right.
as part of their just progression, but sometimes we push it out to an entire school to that's what we did at Schroeder, to show that health is really what they wanted. And it's a really good, accurate.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can use that information, or how comprehensive the testing is of the whole cohort of a grade level. But that information could be very useful for recruiting partners. So, for whatever that's worth.
Great idea.
And then also, I think it might be worthwhile exploring one of the other options. I think there's something called a compact you mentioned, which is not like Great Oaks or Butler Tech, but there might be a way for us to get more CT funding from the state if we have some other arrangement with maybe neighboring school districts that don't offer Career Tech Career Tech pathways and courses that we do offer. So maybe just look at something there that could be creative and maybe a little bit innovative for us, because those arrangements do exist in the state, other places.
Correct, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Bolton.
Yeah, just a follow-up on the credit piece that President Moffitt raised. Maybe that's part of the report card discussion that the policy group is having and is brought back to the board. And I know we're talking about it. I know we're talking in terms of reading level or what have you. But maybe there's and I'm not sure how we report that on the credit. Maybe we do or we don't, but that might be helpful to make that a part, or if it is already a part, emphasize it a little bit more to the families. The other piece, the two things on the career, again, maybe we ought to be looking at the corridors, the 3 corridors. We do know that a lot of the heavy Career Tech stuff is really in Central Corridor by hook or crook. We're not sure how that happened, but we're fortunate. But if we're talking about doing that, then an east and a west is also part of the corridor model, so that the same sorts of programs. But I really do think that our career piece, obviously, we need to build it around all 16 clusters and say that we offer something in every one of those clusters. But it is about, as you mentioned, us getting the kids to where those programs might be. Considering we're not transporting these kids necessarily by yellow bus, if the kids have time within their day, if we could redesign some parts or some days at the high schools so that kids can go to school and then they can also have time during, we've been saying this for a while, in the afternoon or whatever, where they then go to their career tech interest, or even where they are employed. I mean, this is, I just think we need to focus on that from a transportation piece, because we are already teaching them how to get on Metro and get someplace. And so it may not be that cost prohibitive if we're not thinking we have to transport them as almost being grown-ups, because it would probably be either junior and senior year they could be doing that, and they could be employed, or they can do the apprenticeship, which I know the business advisory folks want. And I also think that as we know we're going to be going to the public for more money, we do know, and I'm not sure when or how that's going to happen, but we do know that polling is very high for career tech. So I think we need to start planning on having money for career tech. And I also think that one of the things, at least this is what I'm hearing, even regarding the foundation, is that I think that is one of the big priorities, I believe, is the career tech and apprenticeships and what have you. So maybe we can start, and I'm totally there. I know what it's been like to scrape and scratch for years. And I've been through those years where nobody was giving career tech any dollars. And I think the high schools were terribly underfunded too. But maybe we're in a different place, and that would allow us to think as big as the board may want us to think. And I know what the public wants. And I really think that we should start to enjoy it and say, let's do it, because it is a priority. And if the community starts hearing us say it's a priority, they'll be very gratified about that, because it is a priority for them. But let's figure out how we can facilitate the kids having this opportunity.
I completely agree. Thank you for that. And I also want to say, too, transportation may not be as limiting as a hybrid model. We need to stop thinking about the limits and start recognizing, A, that the governor is pushing this. So to say that there's no money is not true, and people are hearing that. But also, maybe we have students that are on the Zoom or something with another school. I know Assistant Superintendent Badgett and I talked about this for the middle schoolers, having the two schools talk with one teacher, that we need to be a little bit more creative, because the kids are already there. And so we need to remove the no. Board Member Mapp.
Yeah, so that was my question around the middle schools. I recognize that we are working to ensure that there are CTE industry recognized credentials. The middle schools all have a focus. I'm interested in hearing about what has been implemented thus far. We are well into the school year as of now. What support or what plans have been put in place to help provide that level of exposure of CTE for our middle school students?
Sure. Be happy to talk about that. So in all 6 of our middle schools, we do have active career tech middle school courses. So they're a semester. They're not tested. There's no credit. That's the design of the state. So in most of them, there is career tech art, career tech physical fitness. Those who have technology, there's career tech technology. Evanston is very specific in having those, but also career tech business foundations. At Pleasant Hill, we have the career techs I talked about, but we also have an area of focus with urban agriculture, because they are in the corridor with Aiken, and that fits with the Pleasant Hill being an upstander, social justice, because of all of the things that Aiken has done, and urban agriculture fits well with that. So the support that they've been given is they've been given support with curriculum crosswalks between physical fitness, for example, and then the career tech equivalent of middle school, which is exercise science as the state name, but we still call, there goes that microphone again, quit using my hands. And then they've also, so the teachers are required to complete a middle school career tech module. So we get credit for this as a career tech course, and we'll have funding that will kick in eventually. I think it's a year off, the funding is. And so they do, it's up to a 5-hour, it doesn't take them a long time to go in. And it just talks about career tech in a general way, because these are teachers, for example, the one teacher that is doing urban agriculture at Pleasant Hill is an art teacher, but he has a passion for the agriculture. And so he has to go in and do the middle school module, and it teaches him about what it means to be a career tech teacher, what are the trends in career tech. And so they have a lot that they've been given. I will say, and you'll hear more about this, I'm sure, it is mandated that all districts have career tech offered in every 7th and 8th grade setting starting next school year. It's been on the books, and we're not one of the districts that are in the 2/3 that didn't offer any to any students. And so we've been ahead of the game, but I will say that we're already looking at, and I've talked with Assistant Superintendent Badgett about the K through 8s. Had a conversation with Walnut the other day, because Walnut does not have an exemption for this. No one has an exemption. Very creative conversation at Walnut. It was very exciting. And so we're looking at every 7th and 8th grade setting, and it's easier to accomplish than you would think, but it also really has great payoffs for students, because they get exposure to careers that maybe they didn't get in the art class or the physical fitness class. But no credentials in 7th and 8th grade, too young.
Right.
No work-based learning hours. That doesn't mean that they're not getting career exposure. We also have a grant that we got for almost $20,000 that is helping us implement this first year of the career tech middle school model.
Okay, so just for clarity, and totally understand that there's no credentials earned. This is really an explorative stage.
Yes.
For 7th and 8th grade, but I am really wanting to hear more about, while they are in this exploration stage, that there's also some application of learning. So I don't know if that's happening in the curriculum crosswalks, or, what type of hands-on experiences are they actually getting to ensure that there's that interest, right, in these upper-level career opportunities in CTE. And then it also sounds like for our teachers, there's still that kind of infancy stage as well in terms of the learning process. So it sounds like it's something that we're still building out, and maybe
Yes.
not necessarily having the implementation or application of it, but we're at a very foundational level. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I would agree with that, and we're certainly not where we will be, but I will say that we are further than what we could have been, considering that the middle schools are all new and they're dealing with all the new middle school, like, formative things. And so we've not had any pushback from the teachers in doing this. In fact, they are getting some additional extended time to do the hours, and also to familiarize themselves with the career tech crosswalk that they have. One of the other things that our department is doing is involving the 6 middle schools, and this is an initiative that came through our Business Advisory Council. As we do things with some of our high schools, we're also exposing our middle schools, maybe in a not as an intense way, to some of those experiences. So for example, expert panels. We have an expert panel subcommittee. There was an expert panel the other day at Withrow. So what now we want to do is move that expert panel to one of our middle schools and give them that exposure to, I think the one at Withrow was health, logistics, and maybe IT, so that they just get a variety of things. And then when you compare that with the school selection process, and everything that they get. And then Naviance is also available for all 7th and 8th graders, so they can do their career interest profilers as well, so that staff at the school see the trends and all of that. So we're pleased with our progress, but now we're going to have to blow that up to spread it out to all of our 7th and 8th grade. ODEW has not said what the repercussions are for districts who don't do this, but they have definitely made it clear we are no longer going to give slack to any districts who don't do 7th and 8th grade. But they've also given us less funding for career exploration this year with the new governor's budget. That piece of it was cut by 70% across the state, and so we're doing more with less across the state with the 7th and 8th grade. Some districts are having a very difficult time. We're not with this implementation.
And Board Member Matt, we're going to have a presentation from middle schools in, I believe, January, Superintendent Murphy? Was it December or January? December.
I believe it's December.
So you can
That's
send
what
your
I-
questions specifically around the career tech for middle schools then too.
Yeah, the only thing that I was just going to ask was in that meeting, if we could actually have embedded in that presentation specifically what that application, right, or that explorative process looks like in action. And so that's what I would be interested in seeing, to make sure that there is that alignment from, middle school, junior high, and how it is connected to our high school CTE options.
Sure.
Gotcha. All right. I'm looking around just to make sure that everyone's good. Superintendent Murphy, our next topics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem.
Our updates from assignments that were made. Board members, what I did was I asked our admin to put assignments that were academic in nature or that impacted academics significantly on the CAL so we could get the response. So Superintendent Murphy, I believe.
So these
Can
two
introduce our
assignment
next
updates, yes, ma'am, are around transportation. And so Mr. Burkhart is going to chat with us a bit about this.
Yes, thank you. I don't have a comprehensive update at this time. Hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have more information to share, but I do have some updates to get us started. As the question was asked about students marked tardy, the answer is yes. And there's multiple codes that the teacher can use to put in a student who is tardy, one being transportation. So we don't differentiate the transportation code versus yellow bus versus metro versus horseback, whatever the case may be. It's the same. Transportation is just one bucket that we look at. Of the data that Chief Gollihue and Assistant Superintendent Badgett pulled together, we're looking at about 1.4% of those incidents being district-wide. Of that, the question was also asked about Ethel Taylor. Ethel Taylor is 0.87, so much lower than the average across the entire district. We are looking at two issues within that was asked about transportation. I don't have answers to either one comprehensively right now. One was in relation to Ethel Taylor's students on Metro and the bus stop moving and students not being able to get there on time. We have had multiple conversations with Metro. They're pulling data and they're pulling video to see if we can back up some of the claims that were made. Also, in relation to the movement of the Pleasant Hill bus stop, we did have a conversation with Metro. Today, we had a conversation with the city because we want to look at the crosswalks as well in those locations to make sure that the crosswalk will be parallel to wherever we put the Metro stop. There is a better location for the Metro stop further east, I'm going to say, which is closer to a apartment complex where there's plenty of folks to stand. The unintended consequence of that is it's right across the street from the school, and we are afraid that students won't walk down to the crosswalk over and back up, that they'll try to cross mid-block on that. So we have to do some more research on that to find out if that's possible or not, as well as the library, I think that Vice President Bolton brought up. So we're looking at all those options, not a real easy, we're having the conversation and tomorrow it happens. Once we do decide where it's going to be, that old stop is in place for 2 to 3 weeks, where we have signage up to say this bus stop is moving so that we have time to get everyone acclimated, and then we'll set a date to which that bus stop changes.
Okay, thank you. I do have another question for you. This is probably nothing that you can answer today, but it is regarding Metro.
Okay.
There was a comment, an article sent to me that Metro has adjusted their downtown routes to, I don't want to say to prevent, to reduce the number of students that are at Government Square. Can you confirm that Metro has adjusted routes that impact our students?
Yes, I believe the stop at Fifth and Walnut was disbanded or temporarily disbanded, and there's a stop before that, and there's a stop after that. But the Fifth and Walnut stop is no longer Metro is no longer stopping at that exact stop. I believe it's 100 yards to the east and west of that location.
Do we know about how many students?
I don't, I'm sorry, I can find out though.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Craig?
As a former bus rider who took that area, or rode by that area, I think there's like, basically, it goes to Walnut and then it comes back up Main. Most of the buses, they go through Government Square and come back up. So it's not substantially for many folks, but it really is depending on where they're catching the next bus, that type of deal. I do want to ask just kind of one general question, and this is more of a knowledge-based question for us in some ways. There is a difference between the bus arriving late and the bus arriving kind of on a schedule and that a student maybe, or that there was another bus that would have arrived earlier, I guess is more to my point. And so I do think that would be helpful for us as we think about this as well. Is it that the schedule that we're putting students on gets them it makes it unlikely that they will always consistently get to school on time? Or is it that the bus is having, for some reason, a delay and consistent arrivals? Because I think if you're, in theory, you should be getting to school much earlier than like right at entry. Because the other thing I did notice is some of the routes that some students are riding gets them to school just before entry, and to get in the building you're never gonna get in the building on time that way. Right? And so maybe that's something about us encouraging the students or sending something, communicating out to the parents or whatever about using earlier times, similar deal with exiting the building, or safer routes, even in some ways. Because we know that while we give this, routes that you should take, that it's not always the route that students take to get to the school, and it may not always be coming from the same place. So I think that may be the only thing I would maybe add to just whatever discussion we have is at the end of it, is recognizing that, is it the routes that is the problem, that it's inconsistent to get to the school, or is it that if you pick the later route, you're more likely to be arriving behind or after the start of the class?
Yeah, a lot of the Metro routes are obviously supply and demand. So during that supply, both in the morning and afternoon, those buses could, in some cases, arrive, for example, every 7 minutes. But once rush hour is done, it may arrive every 15 minutes. And so those are set up under that schedule to be able to accommodate those. To your point, yes, as we are looking at specifically Ethel Taylor, one of the situations that we found was students did take that last bus. There were 3 buses before that. They did take the last bus, missed their transfer, and then therefore late to school. So we're really digging in to find out all of the nuances, because we're talking about students from not just one section of the district, from all over the district, and there's a lot of variables because of that. So I don't want to give you an answer before we've vetted all of those through, but yes, we're taking those into consideration.
Got it. Right. Doesn't look like did you have a question?
I just want to emphasize the idea that we've said this for a number of months, and it's part of the confusion for the public too, is attendance. And the idea that there's this terrible truancy piece, or that there's this report card that shows that it makes it appear that none of our children are teenagers coming to school. I really do hope that the administration is finding ways to get into the weeds about attendance. is this somebody that is sick, and it's this, because it still counts against them. But when you look at the attendance rates, school by school by school, they're pretty good. But then in the community, they believe that only half of our kids come to school every day. And they don't know that, that's what's out there because of the chronic absenteeism or whatever the report card tends to report. So I think we probably very soon need some sort of understanding of how we do attendance and what absence really is, because it's casting dispersions on us and also obviously our kids.
Well, maybe that's a next Cal report. We get some information around attendance categories and by school and whatnot. Who
Thank you.
knows? All right. If no one else has anything else, the chair will now entertain a motion to recess into executive session to discuss safety and security.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
I also want to remind you before I hit the gavel, gladly, that there is a district-wide LSDMC meeting tonight, and board members have been invited to go get food briefly before the meeting if you want. I wanted to say that before we voted. Mr. Guston.
Will that impact the vote?
It might.
Yeah. I understand
Changes
your
everything
reason.
there.
It might have.
Do you also want to say that we will not be coming back here?
We will not come back. We will recess into exec session and then dismiss from there.
Thank you. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crossett?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Vice President Bolton?